You know, this might have been the funniest part of the entire Trinidad Chambliss situation.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now it's the number one sports podcast network in America. That is because of fans like you taking in content like this, and we will never not be thankful for that. On today's show, we're discussing how the Trinidad Chambliss injunction could reshape the Ole Miss offense and why some believe that the Rebels are trending towards a top 5 team. We also look ahead to the Ole Miss-Texas matchup, a game that already has the feel of a potential game of the year of 2026 in the Southeastern Conference. Next, we're going to break down the judges' sharply worded criticism of the NCAA and what it means for both Chambliss and the broader landscape of college athletics, because he really did not pull punches in that. But first, we're going to start with the reaction across college football and the college football world as opposing fan bases are coming to grips to process the news that Trinidad Chambliss is set to return and why the response says plenty about Ole Miss's trajectory. All of this and more from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, and that is your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, well, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to Mazda because there's more to you. All right. One of the most entertaining portions of yesterday's announcement of the Trinidad Chambliss injunction was the reaction out of opposing fan bases. The ones that thought that, hey, we have a chance of a W against Ole Miss with Deuce Knight there because Trinidad Chambliss, no way he is going to play quarterback. Heck, that's the reason why Lane Kiffin didn't recruit Trinidad Chambliss, because there was no chance that he was going to be able to play this year. And they got on Twitter and immediately, all of a sudden, you would have thought it was like the 1960s out there and there was no NIL, to where you were getting some baseline stuff was like, this is the death of student athletes. And oh my goodness, it was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You have Georgia fans randomly talking noise at Ole Miss over this. Now, remember that Georgia hasn't beaten Ole Miss outside of Kirby Smart, outside of Athens, Georgia, under Kirby Smart ever. And the last time that they won outside of Sanford Stadium, Matthew Stafford, I believe, was the quarterback, and it was like 2009 or something like that. But I digress. It's hilarious that all of a sudden they get on their sanctimonious self that we're ruining the game that we love and we're all rooting for everything to be pure and good and all of that. And Ole Miss doing this, never mind the fact that the NCAA just approved a 9th-year senior yesterday. Never mind that. We're concerned about the purity of the game. We're concerned about what's going to happen to these poor high school kids. It's really, really sad to think of. And LSU fans are like saying, well, Lane Kiffin knew this was going on, but he didn't want the headache and all of this. And honestly, the people that's not talking, Alabama's not talking, and Texas isn't talking. They're not the ones bumping their gums at the moment. And that is because they know they have a chance to win, and they're not going to give Ole Miss any help. I don't think that Georgia has a shot to beat Ole Miss in Oxford. I mean, they're good enough to do it. I just, historically, I just don't see it. You saw what happened in the Sugar Bowl and how Ole Miss completely took over that game. Now you're going to have a second-year version of that going. No, I don't buy it. LSU, you're dealing with big game Lane. And Ole Miss fans all know about big game Lane. Now, their fans, they're petrified because they thought they had a good chance to win. with their $50 million roster, and they cannot afford to take an L in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. The last coach that beat Ole Miss in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, well, that was Ed Orgeron in the 2019 team. Even that, John Rice Plumlee ran for 200 yards and Ole Miss put up 35 points with a bunch of freshmen on the field. The point is, opposing fan bases reacting like this should be the manna from heaven to Ole Miss fans, because this is a tangent acknowledgement by them of where Ole Miss has gotten. And we're going to talk in the third segment how Ole Miss being a top 5 team now, yeah, that's just a given. Going into the preseason, they should be a top 5 team and right up there at the tippy top to be the SEC champion. We're going to talk in the second segment of how the NCAA just completely wimped out in this injunction hearing, and we'll talk about that as well. But right now, we're talking about the entertainment that we got from other fan bases, because, listen, this injunction, although Ole Miss fans have been telling anyone that would listen that this was a home run deal, you still had people from other fan bases trying to equate the Charles Bediako case with the Trinidad Chambliss case. They kept trying to put Trinidad Chambliss right alongside Diego Pavia. Do you know why? Do you realize why they did that? The opposing fan base are starting to rise up a public sentiment because of their fear of the Ole Miss offense. And the NCAA is trying to latch on because they won a case involving Charles Bediako, a case that there was a letter penned essentially by Greg Sankey in that case. But we've been saying from the very beginning that this Trinidad Chambliss case was just a simple 6th-year medical redshirt case. That's all it ever was. It wasn't a Bediako thing. It wasn't trying to get 10 years of eligibility. It was trying to do the same thing that the NCAA has done for 50 years. And the problem with everything was the fact that Division II has different rules than Division I, and the standard for what you had to produce was different. And that gave the NCAA an opportunity to deny it, which is in their bylaws as a mandate to do. The NCAA acted in completely bad faith. Opposing fan bases didn't want to hear any of that. They just wanted this to be a Bediako type situation to where the NCAA wins in court. And there's still going to be people talking about shade tree judges and all of that happening in court. But I promise Trinidad Chambliss won this case on the merits of this case. Do you know how I know that? Because the NCAA lawyer didn't even stick around for the judgment. That is how much they got whipped. They left. They went off to Joey Aguiar's case, which is happening this morning in Knoxville, Tennessee. Same 3 lawyers. So the entertainment of seeing the other fan bases, the fear that is masquerading as trolling and whatever they can do to try and make themselves feel better, should be a tangent acknowledgement to the Ole Miss fans that you've basically arrived to where you obviously have to be afraid. Georgia fans are afraid of you. Florida fans are afraid of you. LSU fans are afraid of you. Alabama fans are afraid of you. Florida fans are afraid of you. And the reaction that this injunction got online is proof of that. And it was by far the most entertaining portion of the night. Well, that and the Pete Golding shark, to where Trinidad came in and he posted a shark. That one right there was pretty fantastic. But now we're going to talk about it in the third segment. Ole Miss has the best quarterback in the country, the best running back in the country, and the best kicker in the country. 3 positions that affect winning. And you want to try and find a way that Ole Miss isn't going to be good? Good luck. We'll see how that works out for you. Anyway, one underrated moment from the hearing was the judge's rebuke of the NCAA And the fact their lawyers didn't even stick around for the judgment, I think they're going to be held in contempt, by the way. We'll talk about why that matters next. You know, hiring isn't just about finding somebody willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs, well, that's the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills or certifications or even location. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target information exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through the mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your job post gets seen by candidates who actually are a fit. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job to premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. And the winter games are officially here. And if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense, from medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care most about. FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action than ever. The drama of curling matches that start slow but somehow get really intense really fast. Speed skating races that are decided by a mere inch. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off, and even niche events become must-watch because when you're fully locked in to the competition, that kind of matters. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to following them with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Hey, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keeps all of this free. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemmiss.supercast.com or check out the link down in the show notes to learn more. All right, so one thing that was pretty interesting about this hearing in Pittsburgh, Mississippi yesterday was the judge's rebuke when he read the hour and a half, roughly, judge's ruling. I'm telling you, it was impressive how much had to get read in that reading, to the point where the NCAA got whipped, okay? There's no way to come out of that and not think that the NCAA got whipped. And here's the thing. The NCAA brought no witnesses. They had no evidence on their side. It was nothing but somebody trying to be argumentative, trying to spout NCAA statutes from time to time to make things work. Ole Miss provided all the medical records, everything in there. And the judge took notice of that, really took notice of that. First of all, there were 2 or 3 moments in the course of the hearing where the lawyer for the NCAA started arguing with the judge, which I'm not a lawyer, but that feels like that's a bad idea from the start. Second of all, they went through and talked about what was going on, and there was no questions for Trinidad Chambliss's mom. They tried a little bit of questioning for Trinidad Chambliss, but nothing real deep. The hardest they went after was Dr. Dye, and they actually had a little bit of momentum there, I felt like, but it disappeared really quickly whenever they kind of overplayed their hand, to the point where everything in this case, from the way it was structured and everything, felt like it was an Ole Miss win. Even in closing arguments, to where Ole Miss went first, then they went to the NCAA and they set a trap, and then the Ole Miss just rebutted on that and completely dunked on the NCAA, to the point where, hey, can we talk? And it's like talking over the closing statement and everything. And it was weird. So that's how the trial or hearing went. So whenever they started reading the verdict, and like I said, it was about 65, 70 minutes of verdict reading. It was huge, in which basically I was told by a lawyer that was basically trying to make this appeal proof, essentially. The exact total thing of the decision is right there, to where there's nothing to go back to. And there's a couple of interesting things on there. One, the judge referred to the NCAA as acting in bad faith, which has been our show's opinion for a week. If you go back and look at it, we consistently talked about them as an evil organization. And the fact that they didn't even send in and provide evidence kind of proved my hot take that I'd been talking about, that they wanted an L in this. They wanted to try really hard and fight about it and spit their normal game, I guess you can say, but they wanted to lose it so they can go to Congress and cry poor. And if you want proof of that, there was a statement released after this verdict that mentioned that only Congress can save us. That's what they said. It's all up to Congress. And so the judge mentioned them operating in bad faith. Now, the NCAA lawyers weren't there because they just took their ball and went home because of how much they had their butt handed to them by William Liston and all of those guys in Trinidad's defense team. The whole proceeding was live streamed. You got to see everything, every question, every facial expression, the judge's body language, the NCAA's body language, which after lunch, man, it looked bad. They knew it was over after they went to lunch. After the Trinidad Chambliss's mom testified, it was over. And then the judge said that the NCAA didn't do what was required to be in the best interest of the athlete, which is supposed to be their core principle. It got to the point to where you wondered if it went on 15 minutes or more. So 15 minutes or more, it might have just ripped apart the whole NCAA. It was every scathing thought that Ole Miss fans have had whenever we was like, hey, we're going to do exemplary cooperation, and then the NCAA just punishes and gives them a near death penalty. And I mean, that's happened twice, not warranted twice, just off of, hey, please be nice to us. The one time that Ole Miss fights, you win. That's the lesson in this whole thing. When the NCAA comes for you, fight. When the NCAA inevitably tries to trump up this tampering thing with Dabo to try and get their pound of flesh back, when that inevitably happens, fight. Have legal counsel working on that right now. So whenever it comes to court, you're ready to go. You have a winner. You have a selective enforcement thing that William Liston actually talked about in his closing arguments. You had yours truly, the evidence that he found that Tom Mars gave him credit for, getting mentioned in the closing arguments as well. That was pretty cool, honestly. The judge's scathing rebuke of the NCAA, I think that's going to be overlooked moving forward. But that record, that talking to what's going on, oh my, it was hot, man. It was. And I was almost glad that the NCAA wasn't there to hear all of that, because it was going to be hot. So we'll see exactly how that goes. I'm pretty fired up to see where it ends up. In our final segment, Ole Miss is a top 5 team, legitimately a top 5 team, and a legitimate favorite to reach Atlanta with a roster that feels every bit as strong as 2024. We start turning the page towards 2026, that season, right after this. Hey, this is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who know, there's more to the score than what's on the screen. Listen, Coach O has the Lady Rebs set for their biggest week in recent memory, and how far they go will go a long way to whether or not they host in the NCAA tournament. We all want Ole Miss and the Lady Rebs to host games in the NCAA tournament in the pavilion. That's the reason that building was built. Coach O has Ole Miss right on the cusp, and they need everybody's help to get that done. With South Carolina and LSU and Tennessee and Kentucky coming up, it's going to be a hard ask, but it can be done. And if it's done, Ole Miss will host in the pavilion. These remind us exactly what it takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, that I never quit. We put that same passion into every model at Mazda. You know, the highlights that make the real, we do that. So go to Mazda and test drive a vehicle today. We do what it takes to make it count, because there's more to Mazda, because there's more to you. You know, one thing that's interesting coming up, we talked about this. This Ole Miss team is a legitimate top 5 team. This team is a legitimate favorite for the SEC crown. Now, will they get there? I don't know. You actually have to play the game. But the talent is on the court. Whenever you start putting rosters side by side, Ole Miss is going to be right up there at the top. Again, number 1 quarterback, number 1 running back, number 1 kicker in all of college football. Whenever you have that, you're going to win some games. It's just the way it's going to be. And we will see how Ole Miss can handle that pressure again. You remember how they wilted in 2024? Because this roster in 2026 is 2024 good. You have players that can play. You have dudes. You have guys that chose to come back instead of going to the NFL. You have guys that chose to come back instead of entering the transfer portal and following the other staff. You have great gets in the transfer portal. Pete Golding did some work, especially on the defensive side of the ball and at wide receiver. I am very excited to see Jontay cook. I was told today that him and Deuce Alexander probably have the best hands on the team right now. Those 2 players are competing for the number 1 jersey, essentially, trying to do it. Deuce Alexander is trying to go to 11-1, but Jontay Cook, who wore 2 at Syracuse last year, I think he's trying to get the 1 jersey, but he could end up at the 2 jersey as well. I'm telling you, as we transition to the 2026 football team and people start paying attention to this roster, you're going to see people like their eyes raise a little bit. You know, you lost Devin Harper. Yeah, but you got Carius Kern. They were both highly ranked offensive linemen coming out of high school. You got Tommy Kinsler coming up. He was going to play a lot for Miami. So tackle should be good. It's going to come down to evaluations at that position, but I am not worried too much because, well, honestly, Trinidad doesn't need a super lot of protection because you have to use a spy against him, which automatically makes the pass rush game a little bit less. And you can kind of Johnny football from time to time. You saw that in the Sugar Bowl, him running around and kind of doing what he's doing. 3 great plays by the defense ended up in a touchdown drive for the Ole Miss Rebels. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss. I'm excited. The game of the year, in my opinion, in the SEC is Ole Miss versus Texas. Anytime a Manning plays Ole Miss, it's special. I know that. The SEC kind of missed the boat not scheduling the game in Oxford. It would have been cool to see a Manning come back to play in Oxford, especially since that's probably this is probably the last time that Ole Miss is going to play a Manning. I mean, Eli's kid could be good or something like that, or Peyton could have somebody, maybe. But this feels like this could be about the last time. Just the law of averages say this is going to be a very rare occurrence. But Ole Miss versus Texas in Austin, the last time that Ole Miss was there, Ole Miss won like 45-20 or something like that. The game was on the Longhorn Network. I think it was one of the first games on the Longhorn Network, but that was in 2013. And Ole Miss, they're going to go over there and have the personnel to match up. They're going to be able to match up with every team on their roster or on their schedule. And if you can handle the tightness of games, which last year they did. Now, every game Ole Miss was up by 2 scores in the fourth quarter. And they lost one, and a couple got a little bit iffy. But the 2-score lead was still there. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how they handle the way the schedule is constructed. We'll do WSNLs in July, just like we always do. But we will start turning our attention towards the 2026 season now that the fourth quarter program's in earnest, because Trinidad Chambliss, he's going to be at morning workouts tomorrow. And that is pretty cool. And I'm excited to see what's going on there. Listen, if you want a little bit more of a breakdown on what went down in Pittsburgh, Mississippi, the live reaction show that we did, it is on the YouTube channel. You can check that out if you haven't already. And we will talk to Michael Katz a little bit later on today or tomorrow morning about what he saw, and is going to be Trinidad this weekend. And we're going to cover reaction shows dealing with the baseball program this weekend as well. So we'll do that Friday night after the game, just about 10 minutes, 12 minutes, something like that, something really quick. So nothing too long of a lift for you, but been really cool. Thank you for tuning in today for the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to continue to talk about Trinidad all weekend. So make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you can get all the episodes as well. We're on all of the social channels, so check that out as well. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get the Locked On Ole Miss podcast ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, plus more. Head to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we're going to send you to the first ever national 24/7 Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel and audio. Make sure you make a second listen to either Locked On SEC or Locked On College Football. Trinidad Chambliss getting eligible, an unbelievably big moment for Ole Miss football and the 2026 season. Should be pretty fun. We'll start working that way. Anyway, howdy toddy, everybody.